Captain Lee Jun stared at the invitation glowing on his tablet, blinked twice, and read it again to make sure he hadn't misunderstood. You have been summoned to the dwelling of Elder Ne of House Talev. Transport will arrive at Harmony Station, Dock 9, at first light on the 7th day of this cycle. Lee ran his fingers through his dark hair and sighed. After 3 years as the human diplomatic liaison on Harmony Station, he prided himself on understanding the complex social rules of the various alien species. The Navarians, however, remained largely a mystery. Tall, insect-like beings with 4 arms and iridescent exoskeletons, they kept mostly to themselves, revealing little about their society beyond what was necessary for diplomatic relations. What Lee did know was that Navarians almost never invited outsiders to their personal dwellings. Their homes were considered sacred spaces, reserved for family members, and those bound by ancient pacts of loyalty. Lee set the tablet down and gazed out the viewport of his quarters. The massive ringed structure of Harmony Station rotated slowly against the backdrop of stars. Somewhere in the eastern arm, a small blue-green transport ship was probably already preparing to collect him for this unprecedented visit. Station, contact Tai of House Talev. Lee instructed the room's communication system. A moment later, the familiar clicking voice of his Navarian colleague filled the room. Diplomat Lee, how may I assist you today? Tai, I just received an invitation from your mother, Elder Ne. She's invited me to your home on Navaria. The line went silent for several seconds. When Tai spoke again, his voice had dropped to a lower register, a sign of discomfort Lee had learned to recognize. I see. When does she request your presence? 7 days from now. Another pause. I will accompany you. It is unusual, but my mother's decisions are not to be questioned. Ta, what's this about? Did I do something wrong? Is this some kind of diplomatic formality I'm unaware of? No, no wrong has been committed, Tai answered quickly. I must attend to matters now. We will speak soon. The connection ended before Lee could ask more questions. He frowned at the abruptness, which was uncharacteristic of his normally polite colleague. Lee spent the next hours reviewing everything he knew about Navarian culture, which wasn't much. The diplomatic database contained basic information about their society, their hive-like governmental structure, their focus on arts and sciences, their strict code of honor, but little about their personal customs or home life. As Lee walked through the station's central promenade later that day, he noticed Kim Ji-hai, the station's senior communications officer, watching him. She gestured subtly for him to join her at a small cafe tucked away from the main thoroughfare. I heard about your invitation, Kim said without preamble as Lee sat down across from her. Her expression was serious as she stirred her tea. News travels fast, Lee replied, accepting the cup she pushed toward him. When it comes to unusual events on this station, yes. Kim leaned forward. Do you understand what this means? Lee shook his head. Not really. Tai seemed uncomfortable about it, but wouldn't explain. Kim looked around to ensure no one was listening, then lowered her voice. I've spent 5 years studying Navarian communication patterns and social structures. Their matriarchs, the elders, only invite outsiders to their dwellings for 3 specific reasons. Lee raised an eyebrow. Which are? Formal adoption into the house, marriage negotiations, or, Kim hesitated. Or what? Honor challenges, usually to the death. Lee nearly spilled his tea. That can't be right. I've done nothing to offend Tai or his family. We've worked together for years without incident. I'm not saying it's any of these things. I'm just telling you what I know. Kim sat back in her chair. Navarians are complicated. Their society operates on layers of meaning that outsiders rarely glimpse. Whatever this invitation means, it's significant. Lee's appetite disappeared. What should I do? You can't refuse. That would be a grave insult. Kim's expression softened. Tread carefully, Lee. Observe everything. Say little. The way you handle this could impact human-Navarian relations for generations. For the next few days, Lee tried to speak with Ty about the invitation, but his friends seemed to be avoiding him. They passed each other in corridors, exchanged professional messages, but Ty always had an excuse to cut conversations short when the topic of his mother arose. On the 5th day, Lee found Ty alone in the botanical garden, standing motionless before a display of rare phosphorescent flowers from his homeworld. "Ty," Lee said softly, approaching slowly. "I need to understand what's happening." The Navarian's 4 arms twitched slightly, a sign of agitation. "My mother sees things others do not. She has plans. Plans involving me. Perhaps." Ta turned, his compound eyes reflecting the garden's soft lighting. "You have been a good colleague, Lee Jun. I consider you a friend, which is rare between our kinds." "I consider you a friend too," Lee said, concern growing at Ta's formal tone. "Then trust that I would not allow harm to come to you." Ta's mandibles clicked softly. "My mother's invitation is unusual, yes, but not meant to threaten. Kim says Navarian elders only invite outsiders home for adoptions, marriages, or duels." Tai made a sound that might have been laughter. "Officer Kim understands much, but not everything. There are other reasons, older reasons." Before Lee could press further, Tai placed one of his upper appendages briefly on Lee's shoulder, an extremely rare gesture of physical contact from a Navarian. "Pack lightly. Bring no weapons, even ceremonial ones. Wear your diplomatic uniform. And Lee." Ta paused. "Be yourself. That is what she wishes to see." With that cryptic advice, Ta departed, leaving Lee alone with the glowing flowers and his growing apprehension. The 7th day arrived. Lee stood at Dock 9 with a small pack containing a change of clothes and the few personal items he thought might be appropriate gifts. His palms were sweating inside his formal gloves as the sleek Navarian vessel docked with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. Whatever awaited him on Navaria, Lee knew one thing with certainty: his life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. The Navarian transport ship glided away from Harmony Station, its blue-green hull shimmering as it entered the jump point that would take them to the Navarian home system. Lee stood at the viewport, watching as the familiar sight of the station grew smaller until it vanished in a flash of light. "First jump complete," announced the ship's pilot, a female Navarian named Suk. 7 more to go. Lee turned to find Tai standing behind him, all 4 of his arms clasped in what Lee had learned was a formal posture. "You should rest," Ta said. "The journey is long." "I'm too nervous to rest," Lee admitted. "This isn't exactly a normal diplomatic mission." Tay's mandibles clicked softly, the Navarian equivalent of a thoughtful hum. "No, it is not." Lee followed Ta through the narrow corridors of the ship to a small chamber that had been prepared for him. Unlike the angular, crystalline architecture favored by Navarians, the room contained a rounded sleeping platform and environmental controls set for human comfort. "Someone went to a lot of trouble," Lee observed. "My mother's instructions," Tay replied simply. "She wants you at ease." Lee sat on the edge of the bed. "Why won't you tell me what this is about, Ta? We've worked together for 3 years. Don't I deserve to know why I'm being summoned across half the galaxy?" Ta's large compound eyes seemed to study Lee intensely. "My mother has her reasons," he said finally. "She sees potential in humans that others have missed." "What potential? What does that mean?" But Tai only bowed slightly and backed out of the room. "Rest, friend Lee. We have many days ahead." The 8-day journey settled into a strange routine. Lee spent hours in the ship's small library, studying whatever information about Navaria was available. Tai joined him for meals but maintained his frustrating silence about the purpose of their trip. When pressed, he would change the subject or excuse himself entirely. On the 3rd day, Lee cornered Suk in the ship's tiny galley. "Is it normal for elders to invite aliens to Navaria?" he asked as she prepared a nutrient solution. Suk's head tilted at a sharp angle, a sign of surprise. "No, this is very unusual." Has it happened before? Once, perhaps twice in recorded history. She paused, studying him with obvious curiosity. You must be special. Or I'm being taken to my execution. Lee joked nervously. Suk didn't laugh. Elder Na is wise and fair. If she called you, there is purpose. On the 6th day, Lee woke to find Ta waiting in his room, holding a bundle of shimmering fabric. We will arrive tomorrow, Ta announced. These clothes are for you. They mark you as an honored guest of House Talev. Lee took the bundle cautiously. The material felt like silk, but seemed to change color slightly at his touch. Ta, please, just give me something. Anything. I'm going in blind here. For a moment, Tai seemed to waver. His upper appendages twitched in what Lee recognized as internal conflict. My mother believes. Ta began, then stopped. She has studied your species. She believes humans possess unique qualities that may be valuable. Valuable for what? That is for her to explain. Ta moved toward the door, then hesitated. Lee, know this. You were not chosen randomly. My mother has watched your work on Harmony Station with great interest. Your approach to the Zentari conflict resolution, it impressed her. Lee blinked in surprise. The Zentari negotiations had been a minor diplomatic incident from nearly 2 years ago. He'd found a compromise no one else had considered, but it hardly seemed noteworthy. That was just doing my job. Perhaps, Tay replied, or perhaps it was something more. The final day of travel passed in a blur of anticipation. When the ship entered Navarian space, Lee was called to the bridge. Through the main viewport, he got his first glimpse of Navaria. Unlike Earth with its blue oceans, Navaria was a world of amber and rose. Vast crystalline formations broke through the planet's surface, glinting in the light of twin suns. It's beautiful, Lee whispered. Home, Ta said simply, standing beside him. Their descent through the atmosphere turned the viewports a soft pink. As they broke through the cloud layer, Lee gasped. Below them spread vast city hives, massive crystalline structures rising kilometers into the sky. They resembled giant honeycombs made of translucent gemstones, connected by delicate bridges that sparkled in the dual sunlight. Our oldest hive city is 10,000 years old, Ta said, obvious pride in his voice. What you see is the work of countless generations. Lee thought of Earth's oldest structures, the pyramids, the Great Wall, mere infants compared to this ancient civilization. It makes human architecture seem primitive, he admitted. Different, Ta corrected. Not primitive. Your kind builds differently because you think differently. That is what interests my mother. Their ship docked at a crystalline platform jutting from one of the smaller hives. As they disembarked, Lee became acutely aware of the stares directed his way. Navarians paused in their activities, their elongated heads turning to track his movements. Some leaned together, mandibles clicking rapidly in whispered conversations. They're all looking at me, Lee murmured. Most have never seen a human in person, Tai explained, guiding him toward a waiting transport. And none have seen one here, in our dwelling hive. The transport, a hovering crystal platform with no visible controls, carried them through the heart of the hive city. Lee marveled at the intricate chambers and passages, the play of light through translucent walls, and the busy Navarians going about their daily lives. As they approached a particularly ornate section of the hive, the curious stares from passing Navarians intensified. Even the transport operator kept turning to glance at Lee. Why do I feel like I'm part of a parade? Lee asked quietly. Tai hesitated, then finally admitted, you are the first human to ever receive a matriarch's personal invitation. This is unprecedented. The transport slowed as they approached a massive crystalline doorway inscribed with symbols Lee couldn't read. 2 tall Navarian guards stood at attention, their exoskeletons gleaming with ceremonial markings. My mother's dwelling, Ta said. Once we enter, there is no turning back. Are you prepared, Lee Jun? Lee straightened his borrowed ceremonial clothes and took a deep breath. Whatever waited behind those doors, diplomatic opportunity, cultural exchange, or something more dangerous. He would face it with the dignity expected of Earth's representative. "I'm ready," he said, hoping it was true. The massive crystal doors parted silently, revealing a vast chamber that took Lee's breath away. Unlike the functional areas of the Hive City, Elder Na's dwelling was a masterpiece of Navarian artistry. The entire space seemed to have been carved from a single enormous crystal, with walls that caught and refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. "Welcome to the heart of House Talev," Ta said softly. Lee stepped forward cautiously. The floor beneath his feet was smooth and warm, nothing like the cold crystal it appeared to be. Along the walls hung what Lee assumed were ancient artifacts, curved objects that might have been weapons, delicate structures that resembled star charts, and items he couldn't begin to identify. Each gave off a subtle glow, illuminating the chamber with light that shifted gradually through a spectrum of colors. "These are the treasures of my family line," Tai explained, gesturing to a particularly ornate item that resembled a four-armed staff. "This belonged to the founder of our house, from before we achieved spaceflight." Lee approached one wall where a series of what appeared to be ceremonial masks hung. Each bore a striking resemblance to Navarian facial features, but with subtle variations that hinted at the passage of time and evolution. "Our ancestors," Ta confirmed, following Lee's gaze. 15 generations of matriarchs. Before Lee could ask more questions, a soft chime sounded throughout the chamber. Tai immediately straightened, his forearms falling into a formal posture. "My mother approaches," he said, voice dropping to a respectful hush. "Remember to keep your eyes lowered initially, then meet her gaze when she addresses you directly." Lee nodded, heart pounding as he recalled the diplomatic briefings on Navarian customs. He turned toward the far end of the chamber, where another set of crystal doors slowly parted. The figure that emerged made Lee struggle to maintain his composure. Elder Na stood nearly 3 meters tall, much larger than Tai, or any Navarian Lee had met on Harmony Station. Her exoskeleton was not the muted green of ordinary Navarians, but a brilliant iridescent blue that caught the light and broke it into rainbows. All 4 of her arms were adorned with intricately carved bangles that clinked softly as she moved. Most striking were her compound eyes, larger and more faceted than those of other Navarians, giving the unsettling impression that she was seeing not just Lee, but through him. Lee lowered his gaze as instructed, fighting the instinct to step backward. "Human Lee." Elder Na spoke, her clicking speech translated by a small device at her throat. The voice that emerged was surprisingly melodious. "Your presence honors this dwelling." "The honor is mine." "Elder Na," Lee replied, forcing steadiness into his voice. "I am grateful for your invitation." "You may look upon me now," she said. Lee raised his eyes to find her studying him with unmistakable curiosity. The intensity of her gaze made him feel like a specimen under examination. "You are smaller than I expected," she observed, circling him slowly. "Yet your kind has achieved much despite your physical limitations." "We try to compensate in other ways," Lee said diplomatically. A sound emanated from Elder Na that the translator didn't convert, but Lee recognized it as laughter. "Well answered, human. Come, share sustenance. We have much to discuss." Lee followed Elder Na and Tai deeper into the dwelling, through corridors that twisted and turned in ways that would make retracing his steps impossible. They eventually entered a smaller chamber where a low table had been set with various vessels and containers. To Lee's surprise, one section of the table was clearly arranged for a human diner, with recognizable utensils and what appeared to be food compatible with human biology. "You've gone to considerable trouble," Lee noted as he carefully sat on the provided cushion. "Understanding requires effort," Elder Na replied, settling herself across from him. "One cannot truly know another species without experiencing their customs." What followed was unlike any diplomatic dinner Lee had ever attended. Rather than the usual exchange of pleasantries and careful avoidance of sensitive topics, Elder Na launched into direct, probing questions almost immediately. "Your family structure puzzles me." she said as Tai served a strange blue liquid that smelled surprisingly like mint. You form small units with little connection to the broader lineage. How do you maintain genetic diversity and cultural continuity? Lee explained human family structures as best he could, touching on everything from nuclear families to extended clans and cultural traditions. Elder Na interrupted frequently with questions that seemed oddly specific. And these families, they accept genetic strangers through this process of adoption, without blood connection. Yes, Lee confirmed. Many humans believe family bonds can be formed through love and commitment, not just biology. Fascinating, Elder Na said, her upper appendages moving in what Lee recognized as a gesture of deep thought. And when threatened, these unrelated family members will defend each other, even at risk to themselves. Absolutely, Lee said. Some of the strongest human bonds aren't based on shared genetics at all. As the meal progressed, Lee noticed small devices placed throughout the chamber. Some emitted faint lights that occasionally pulsed, while others seemed to be recording or scanning. One particularly strange device near his seat emitted a barely audible hum whenever he spoke. Elder Na's questions became increasingly personal. She asked about Lee's childhood, his education, his approach to problem-solving. She seemed particularly interested in how he had handled various diplomatic crises on Harmony Station. The Zentari conflict, she said, referencing the same incident Tai had mentioned. You found a solution no one else considered. It wasn't particularly clever, Lee said modestly. I just realized both sides were arguing about territory when what they really wanted was access to specific resources. Once I reframed the problem, the solution became obvious. Obvious to you, Elder Na noted. Not to the Zentari, the Gorgalians, or even to my son. Why do you think that is? Lee considered the question carefully. Humans have a saying. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Maybe I just brought a different tool to the problem. Something in Elder Na's posture shifted at his words. She exchanged a quick look with Tai that Lee couldn't interpret. Indeed, she said softly. A different tool. As the meal concluded, Elder Na rose to her full impressive height. From a concealed compartment in the wall, she removed a small object and approached Lee. Human Lee, you have shared your thoughts and history with House Talav. In recognition, I offer you this token. She held out what appeared to be a small crystal pendant, suspended on a chain of some unfamiliar metallic material. The crystal caught the light strangely, seeming to hold it rather than reflect it. Lee recognized the ceremonial nature of the moment, though he had no idea what the pendant signified. Standing carefully, he bowed as he had been instructed and accepted the gift with both hands. Thank you, Elder Na. I will treasure it as a symbol of friendship between our peoples. As the pendant touched his palm, Lee felt a slight tingling sensation. For a brief moment, the crystal seemed to pulse with an inner light that matched his heartbeat. Then it faded to a gentle glow. Elder Na's compound eyes reflected the light of the pendant. Yes, she said, more to herself than to Lee. I was right about you. After the formal dinner concluded, Elder Na departed with a ceremonial bow, leaving Lee alone with Tai in a smaller chamber within the vast crystal dwelling. The room was more comfortable than the grand dining hall, furnished with seating that accommodated human physiology and lit with a softer glow that reminded Lee of sunset on Earth. Lee turned the crystal pendant over in his hands, studying how it caught and transformed the light. It's beautiful, he said, but I don't understand its significance. Is this just a diplomatic gift? Ta's forearms shifted in a gesture Lee had come to recognize as discomfort. The Navarian settled onto a crystalline bench across from Lee, his compound eyes reflecting the room's ambient glow. It is more than a gift, Ta said finally. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of nervousness Lee had rarely seen in his usually composed colleague. My mother wanted to tell you herself, but she was called away on urgent matters. The responsibility falls to me. Tell me what? Lee asked, suddenly alert. The pendant in his hand seemed heavier somehow. The pendant contains a scanner, Tide explained. While you wore it during dinner, it analyzed your genetic structure, neurological patterns, stress responses, and thought processes. Lee nearly dropped the pendant. It did what? Without my consent. It was necessary, Ta said, his voice dropping to a lower register. We needed to confirm what we suspected about humans, about you specifically. And what exactly did you suspect? Lee's diplomatic training kicked in, helping him keep his voice calm despite the violation he felt. Tay rose and activated a hidden panel in the wall. A three-dimensional display appeared in the center of the room, a map of the galaxy with certain regions highlighted in various colors. What do you know about the history of our galaxy, Lee? Only what's in the diplomatic briefings. The known spacefaring civilizations, major treaties, trade routes. Tai made a sound that the translator didn't catch, something between a laugh and a sigh. That is the official history. There is another. The display zoomed in on a region far from both Earth and Nevaria. A dark area spread across several star systems like an ink stain. My mother invited you to evaluate humans as potential allies, Ta said, mandibles clicking nervously. Because we are at war. We have been for centuries. Lee stared at the display, then back at Ta. War? With whom? There's been no mention of this in any diplomatic channel. It is a secret war. It must remain so, for the protection of younger species like your own. Ta adjusted the display, showing the dark region slowly expanding over time. The enemy moves slowly, carefully. They consume rather than conquer. Who are they? We call them the Void. They exist in dimensions adjacent to our own, slipping through occasionally to feed on sentient life and the energy of stars. They are not alive as we understand life. They are hunger given form. Lee might have laughed at such a dramatic description if not for the deadly seriousness in Ta's posture. And you've been fighting them. How? Not just Nevarians. An alliance of the elder races, those who achieved interstellar travel millennia before humans left their solar system. We formed a protective boundary around the developing worlds. The display shifted again, showing a ring of systems, including Nevaria, surrounding a section of the galaxy that included Earth and dozens of other worlds. You've been protecting us? Lee asked incredulously, without our knowledge. Yes, Earth has been under our protection since your Industrial Revolution, when your energy emissions first attracted the Void's attention. Lee absorbed this information in stunned silence. His training in first contact scenarios hadn't prepared him for discovering that humanity had already been contacted and protected for centuries without their knowledge. The pendant, Lee said finally. What did it tell you? It confirmed what my mother suspected. Humans possess certain traits that make you uniquely valuable against the Void. What traits? Tay's head tilted in a gesture of consideration. Your minds work differently. Where most species see patterns and follow them, humans see patterns and break them. Where we seek harmony, you embrace chaos as a tool. Your creativity emerges from limitation in ways we cannot replicate. That sounds more like a disadvantage than a strength, Lee observed. Against conventional enemies, perhaps. But the Void operates on patterns, predictable despite their alienness. They cannot comprehend true randomness or intuitive leaps. Your human unpredictability confuses them. It may be our greatest weapon. Lee stood and paced the small chamber, the pendant clutched tightly in his fist. Why me specifically? There are billions of humans. Because you befriended me without hesitation, Tay replied simply. That quality is rare across the stars. Friendship. That's why I'm here. Not just friendship. Your willingness to connect across species barriers, to see me as a person rather than an alien entity. Most of your diplomatic corps maintains professional distance. You seek genuine understanding. Tay approached and placed one of his upper appendages gently on Lee's shoulder, a rare gesture of physical contact from a Nevarian. The Void cannot comprehend connection without purpose, kindness without advantage. It is an alien concept to them. In our observations of Earth, We found this capacity for empathy across differences to be uniquely developed in humans. Lee sat back down, his mind racing. So what happens now? Why tell me all this? My mother offers you a choice, Ta said. Return to Harmony Station and forget this conversation. We can adjust your memory if necessary, or become Earth's first representative in our alliance. Help us prepare humanity for the truth, gradually and carefully. That's not much of a choice, Lee said. Forget everything or carry the weight of this secret alone. It is more choice than most species receive, Ta noted. The existence of the void must remain hidden from the general population of all worlds. Mass panic would only feed them. Fear generates energy patterns they can detect across vast distances. Lee looked down at the pendant, which now glowed with a steady pulse that matched his heartbeat. If I agree to this representative role, what would it entail? You would continue your diplomatic duties, but with new knowledge. You would help identify other humans with similar potential, and you would receive training to resist void influence. They can affect dreams across great distances. And Earth would gain what? Continued protection, advanced technology, shared carefully to prevent disruption of your natural development, and eventually, a place among the elder races of the Alliance. Lee's diplomatic training hadn't prepared him for this moment. The magnitude of the decision overwhelmed him, not just for himself, but potentially for all humanity. I need time to think, he said finally. Of course, Tai agreed, but not too much time. The void is growing bolder. 3 systems have gone dark in the past cycle. We believe they are testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses. Lee looked up at the galactic display, at the tiny point of light that represented Earth. So vulnerable, so unaware of the darkness gathering at the edges of known space. Why hasn't the Alliance simply told humanity about the threat? Lee asked. We've faced existential dangers before. Some on the council proposed that, Tai admitted, but history has shown that younger species often react unpredictably to such revelations. Some collapse into religious fervor. Others experience cultural breakdown. A few have even attempted to contact the void, believing they could negotiate. And what happened to them? Tai's silence was answer enough. Lee stared at the pendant in his hand. From diplomatic officer to potential representative of humanity in a secret interstellar war, it was beyond absurd. Yet he could not deny the sincerity in Ta's manner, nor the inexplicable sense of truth he felt. I'll need proof, Lee said finally. Something beyond maps and stories. Ta nodded. Tomorrow, my mother will show you. After that, you must decide. The proof came at dawn. Elder Ne led Lee to an ancient observatory deep within the crystal hive, where a device unlike anything he had ever seen projected a real-time view of space around a distant star system. Watch, she said simply. At first, Lee saw nothing unusual, just a yellow star with its family of planets. Then he noticed something wrong with the light. Around one of the outer planets, shadows moved where no shadows should be. Not ships or natural phenomena, but tears in the fabric of space itself. The void, Elder Nutt explained. This system falls tonight. As Lee watched in horror, the shadows expanded, darkening the planet below. Over the course of an hour, the entire world vanished from view, as if it had never existed. That was the moment Lee made his decision. I'll do it, he said quietly. I'll be your representative. The next 3 months transformed Lee in ways he could never have imagined. He remained in Elder Ne's dwelling, undergoing intensive training alongside Ta and other Nevarian specialists. Each day brought new revelations about the true nature of the galaxy and the ancient conflict that had shaped it. He learned to recognize the subtle signs of void infiltration, strange dreams, unexplained power fluctuations, unusual behavior patterns in local wildlife. He studied the history of the Alliance, discovering that some of humanity's oldest myths about darkness and light had roots in ancestral memories of early void incursions. Most importantly, he received specialized training to protect his mind from void influence. The crystal pendant he now wore constantly served as both shield and key, its resonance attuned specifically to his neurological patterns. Your mind must be both open and guarded. Eldernay instructed during these sessions. Flexibility is your strength, but it can become vulnerability if not properly channeled. The most surprising aspect of Lee's training came when Eldernay presented him with tactical scenarios that had confounded Alliance strategists for centuries. Approach these with your human perspective, she urged. Forget everything we have taught you about conventional strategy. Lee studied the first problem, a simulation of a system under void attack, with limited defensive resources available. The Navarian approach had always been to establish symmetrical defense patterns, strengthening weak points to create perfect balance. That's your mistake, Lee said after considering the problem. You're thinking like architects, creating perfect structures. The void adapts to patterns, so don't give them any. He rearranged the defensive assets in what appeared to be a random, even chaotic configuration. Some sectors were left completely undefended while others had overlapping protection. This makes no sense, protested one of the Navarian strategists. You've created obvious weaknesses. Exactly, Lee explained. But they're intentional weaknesses, traps. When the void follows pattern recognition to exploit them, they'll encounter unexpected resistance from these seemingly unrelated positions. Eldernay's compound eyes gleamed as she studied the reconfigured defenses. Deliberate chaos as strategy. Fascinating. Over the following weeks, Lee tackled more simulations, each time offering approaches that seemed counterintuitive to the Navarians, but made perfect sense to his human way of thinking. Where the Navarians saw patterns to maintain, Lee saw opportunities for disruption. Where they sought perfect balance, he introduced controlled imbalance. Where they built walls, he created doors, but doors that led to traps. This is exactly why I invited you, Eldernay told him after a particularly successful simulation. Humans think differently than any species we've encountered. Your minds evolved on a planet of constant change and threat. You see possibilities where we see only problems. One evening, as Lee sat with Ta watching the twin suns set over the Crystal City, he voiced a concern that had been growing. I can't be the only representative forever. Earth needs to know. At least some of us need to know. Tay's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The Council has been discussing this. Your success has convinced many that humans are ready for limited disclosure. How limited? Your United Nations Security Council. A first step. The preparation for this momentous meeting consumed the next 3 months. Lee returned to Harmony Station with a cover story about a cultural exchange, while secretly working with Tai to prepare Earth's first official introduction to galactic society. Selecting which human officials would receive this world-changing information had been a delicate process. Lee had advocated for inclusion of not just political leaders, but also scientists, philosophers, and cultural representatives. Understanding must be holistic, he argued to the Alliance Council. Humans need context beyond mere threat. Now, 6 months after his fateful dinner in Eldernay's dwelling, Lee stood in the United Nations headquarters in New York. The Security Council chamber had been secured with technology far beyond Earth's capabilities, ensuring absolute privacy for what was about to occur. The 15 members of the Council watched with expressions ranging from skepticism to awe as Eldernay and representatives of 7 other Alliance species entered the chamber. Some Council members gripped their chairs tightly. Others leaned forward in fascination. None had been told exactly what this extraordinary session would reveal. Lee took his position at the podium, acutely aware of standing at a pivot point in human history. Behind him stood beings from civilizations thousands of years more advanced than Earth. Before him sat the representatives of humanity, about to learn they were not alone and not safe. He touched the crystal pendant at his throat, drawing comfort from its warm pulse. The weight of responsibility was enormous, but he no longer carried it alone. Ta stood beside him, a friend from across the stars, ready to help bridge the vast gulf between worlds. Lee looked out at the faces of Earth's leaders and saw in them the qualities that had drawn the Alliance to humanity: curiosity, adaptability, resilience. The same qualities that might yet turn the tide against the darkness encroaching at the edges of known space. Humanity has always looked to the stars, Lee began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. What we never realized is that the stars have been watching us too, and they need our help. A soft murmur ran through the council members. In the back of the chamber, view screens activated, showing the true face of the galaxy, both its wonders and its terrors. Today, Earth takes its place in a community older and vaster than we ever imagined. Lee continued, "We face a threat beyond our worst nightmares, but we bring to this fight something unique, our human perspective." As Lee spoke, he felt a subtle change in the room's atmosphere. Initial fear was giving way to something else, the same determination he had seen throughout human history when people faced overwhelming odds. "We stand at a crossroads," he said. "The path ahead will not be easy, but humans have never chosen paths because they were easy." Elder Na moved forward to stand beside him, her towering form a visual reminder of the new reality humanity was entering. Together, Lee concluded, "We will find a new way forward, not just for Earth, but for all worlds that face the void." As the formal presentations began, Lee stepped back, watching Earth's first hesitant steps into a larger universe. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous, but for the first time since learning about the void, he felt genuine hope. Perhaps humanity's greatest strength had never been its technology or its achievements, but simply its different way of seeing, its ability to find light even in the darkest corners of existence. The crystal pendant at his throat pulsed in time with his heartbeat, a reminder of the connection now forged between Earth and stars beyond counting, a connection that might yet save them all.